Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're hanging out with Andre, aka Copycatt. He's an Australian-based producer and has a dedicated following with his hip-hop neuro genre. He's also really known for his sound design. If you don't know Copycatt, he's had collaborations with notable artists like Frequent and Mr. Bill, who I had on the podcast. And he has also had his tracks performed by artists such as Pretty Lights, Haywyre, Mr. Carmack, Tipper, Excision, and many, many others. In this episode, we talk about a lot of really good stuff, so make sure you listen to the very end. And huge shout out to Copycatt for being on this podcast. I love his music. Make sure you click those links in the description of this episode and check it out for yourself. Before we jump into today's conversation, just want to give you a heads up. It would help me out a lot if you hit that like, subscribe, follow button wherever you listen to your podcast, especially Spotify. If you want to be the first to get new episodes and other fun random devices and emails I'm sending out about what's happening in the Ableton world, then I encourage you to check out the newsletter. Just go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter and check back on Tuesdays, every other Tuesday, for new episodes. Much love to all of you out there listening to the podcast. If you have suggestions on how I can improve the podcast or specific guests that you would like to see on the show, then go to liveproducersonline.com/podcast, scroll to the bottom and submit the form. That'll shoot me an email and I would love to hear from you. And without wasting more time, let's jump into this episode with Andre. But thanks, dude, for joining the podcast. I'm stoked to hang out with you. I've been listening to your music probably since like 2018, maybe.
Oh yeah,
2019.
yeah.
Been a minute, and you're in Melbourne, is that right?
Actually, the Sunshine Coast, so Queensland at the moment. I was in Melbourne for about a year and a bit. At probably the worst time possible to be in Melbourne. It was like, actually, I think Melbourne got deemed the most lockdown city in the world at one point. Like they had the strictest lockdown procedures. It was literally like curfew and all this awful stuff. So
yeah, glad that's over.
Not there anymore though. I'm on Sunshine Coast, so like near the beach.
Okay, sounds great, man. Yeah, I'm in Denver, Colorado right now. I moved here like 7 months ago, and it's also very sunny here all the time.
Yeah, what's the weather like in Denver? I feel like, it looks kind of like the ideal middle ground. Like you can ski and snowboard at some part of the year, and then, I don't know, you can go outside and climb rocks and stuff.
Yeah, it has pretty much everything except for the beach.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot to do here. The city's overpopulated, but it's beautiful. Get a lot of sunshine. Just because the elevation, we're so high up, so snow pretty much melts the next day. So if we get a bunch of snow, it doesn't usually last long at all.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
But there's definitely snow. Yeah, it's not bad. It's a great city. The music scene is like really blowing up here, and there's all kinds of venues, and you should come out and play a show sometime.
Yeah, that's the goal. I'd love to come out to Denver in particular. Lots of buddies over there. Yeah. I think is Bill living there at the moment?
No, he used to live here, and now I believe he's in Atlanta.
Yeah, okay. That kind of sounds right.
Yeah.
But also like Nolan, Frequent, Kyoto, Tom Brennan. Yeah, I feel like Denver's kind of a good spot to be, particularly if you're making like halftime or like mid-tempo neuro-y stuff. There seems to be a massive scene for it there.
Bass music scene here is huge.
Right.
It's a fun place to be. There's a lot of good energy here. And like I've heard so many people say that Denver has the best fans, which I really think is true just from my experience here. Yeah, like cuz I've been to shows where I was kind of like, wow, this is really bad. But everybody at the show is still having a really good time and going really hard and like dancing and having the best time, even if like they're not feeling the music. They're just there for the vibe.
Oh, damn. Sounds like a dream.
Yeah. It's a great place to play and just to be in general. And I've heard several of your tracks played out, and I was like, oh, that's Copycatt. Dope.
Oh, that's so.
Hopefully you're getting those royalties being played.
Yeah, hopefully they're submitting their set lists to APRA or whatever, giving me that 30 cents. Or actually, I don't even know what it is, like that you get paid per play for show plays, but
I'm the wrong person to be asking about royalties in that sense. Yeah. But for another podcast, another day, maybe. Yeah. I was actually just listening, speaking of your music, I was listening to that banger of a track you made for Play School.
Oh,
it was amazing. Like It was really funny because like it's anybody who doesn't know what Play School is. I didn't even know what it was until you mentioned it, but it's like kind of like a Bear in the Big Blue House, like Dora the Explorer kind of like kids show vibe.
Yeah.
And you did like a remix competition and won, I guess like back in 2016 or something. And it's funny because like a lot of your music's really like underground, like glitch hop, bassy, like kind of like more aggressive, and it's like this kids TV show, and you mashed it up and made like this heavy
Yeah.
banger. It's so funny.
Yeah, that will forever cast a tiny shadow maybe now, but on my career. Because Australia, like, there's definitely not a scene as much for like the neuro halftimey kind of stuff. So I think
Really?
there's like a lot of people know, maybe not so much now, but definitely there was a phase where anyone from Australia who actually knew my music probably knew of it because of that remix. So it was such a weird crossover, like all these people who would never touch like some weird halftime tune being like, "Oh, I heard you on Triple J." Like it was just like,
It's amazing. Oh, I love it. Do you ever play that live? Do you ever play that song
hell
live at shows?
no way.
You absolutely
Maybe get
should.
away with it in Australia, but I don't know. I've never been inspired to. I've never been like, man, I can't wait to drop the Play School remix on people.
Hey man, I'd be there for it. You could rickroll so many people in Australia with that. Just like there's a really long epic build up into that.
Just big bear roll people. Oh yeah.
Be perfect. Yeah, I made something really like amazing and epic, and it's really stupid for my nephew. He's obsessed with Elmo, and my sister was going insane because she heard the Elmo song like on repeat for like a whole year, and she's just like, I can't listen to this song anymore. So like my Christmas gift to him, he was like 5 years old. I like made him like a remix of Elmo, and it was like this gangster rap, like really like dirty dubstep drop. And I think it has like 7,000 plays on YouTube or something stupid like that. Found a bunch of images of like Elmo on Google Images being a gangster and just like really stupid, like dark, kind of borderline like evil. And I just made a compilation that went with the song.
Wait, what's this Elmo song? Is there like an actual like Elmo theme song? Or
Oh yeah. It's like a really the Elmo song is like huge amongst a bunch of kids 5 and under.
amongst the Elmo enjoyer society?
Yeah, it's really like a cult following.
Wow.
Yeah, there was like all the comments were like moms being like, "Thank you for making a new version of the song that I can like play for my child," because I was going crazy listening to the same original
Wow,
version.
you found a niche market.
I
You should have
did.
sold
That's
it. Should have sold it on Beatport and
I should have
charged.
made
Spotify,
millions.
yeah.
That would be my claim to fame. All my serious music just gets deleted. I become the Elmo guy.
Yeah, I mean, look, as the Play School guy, I can recommend. You know, it can be useful.
Right. This is our
Yeah.
future. Yeah. Well, your song "Tom's Battery" and "Sweet Soul" are two of your more popular tracks, and I actually mashed that up. I used to play with a saxophonist and a keyboardist, and we would play that song live, but kind of like chopped up in like a different way.
Yeah.
Regardless, they're bangers. I love those tracks, and I love your music, and I'm super stoked to have you on the podcast. Yeah. Well, for anybody out there who hasn't listened to you or doesn't know who you are, maybe share a little bit about your music background. Like, I'd love to learn more about you. Like, how did you eventually obviously get into Ableton Live? Because this is the Ableton podcast, and maybe we can nerd out more later.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, both my parents are kind of musical. Like my mom is like a trained pianist. She didn't do that
Cool.
professionally, but that was, I guess, like her background. She's pretty musical, and my dad's like a pretty avid guitarist. So I would say before I started doing anything musical, I was at least exposed to like music software. I think my dad had this program called Cakewalk or something like that. It's just like,
That's a throwback.
yeah. I mean, like, I never see it anywhere now. I don't even think I saw it much
Mm-mm.
back then. Like, it was just sort of this weird niche bit of software that just seemed alien to me. But yeah, so there's a little bit of that. And then actually, there's a cereal brand that I think anyone who's heard this, Flume did like an interview about this as well. In Australia, there's a brand of cereal called Nutrigrain. And they put out these like series of demo discs that had like kind of like really dumbed down production software on them. They had like loop making stuff.
In cereal boxes?
Yeah. Cereal
Wow,
boxes used to be the shit. I feel like the cereal's
No, you're
cereal's
right.
boring now. They just put cereal in the box, which sucks.
It's true. It's
But they
true.
used to put cool shit in the cereal boxes. But yeah, this software was one of them. I started messing around with like that when I would have been probably 10ish. And I think that would probably be my first encounter with music production stuff. And then slowly just dabbled with different things throughout my childhood and eventually got FL Studio for like, yeah, I would have been about 15 and then used that for 5 years. And then all of my nerd friends were using Ableton and I eventually transferred. And now I use both.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you found the light because we all know Ableton's better.
Yeah.
In your opinion, I'm just curious. Like a lot of people end up, it seems like going from FL to Ableton, but you said you still use FL, and I'm curious myself because I don't honestly use FL like ever, and it would take me a second to navigate it. Like, what are some of the benefits of FL that you do like in comparison?
I would say kind of the main draw for me is like the layout of the arrangement view. It's different. Like there are some, it's not like an objective better thing. I think it really is just like it has this kind of particular perk that's really good sometimes where it's kind of like just a big canvas. So you don't have track lanes or anything like that. You just have this big
Mm.
blank area. Like obviously you've got a timeline, so it matters like where you put things from left to right, but it doesn't matter where you put things top to bottom or if they're on top of each other or whatever. So for me, I've found for
Mm.
like smashing out ideas, what you do is you kind of like put all of your sounds in this like channel window to the side. So that's where you like put your sounds in and mix them and stuff. And then when you're actually arranging and writing music, it's like you just kind of paste stuff wherever you want. Which for me, like if I'm
Mm.
adding a million sounds into the project but not using them all the time, that's really convenient for me because it means that I'm not scrolling like I don't know 80 tracks
Yeah, top to
down.
bottom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Which I've gotten better
yeah.
at organizing my Ableton projects now, so I think I'm still more dominant with Ableton. But every now and then, if I just want to like muck around with a different workflow, I really enjoy FL Studio for that. I think just like the big canvas kind of layout.
That makes sense. I guess for individual samples, I kind of rely on drum racks for that. But if you have more like longer, multiple clips, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, drum rack's good actually. I definitely find. I mean, I think FL has like FPC or something like that, but I never use it. Like, I
Mm,
definitely find the drum rack setup in Ableton is, yeah, that's very convenient. So I can't get enough of that.
for sure. So you went into Ableton Live, and like when did you start like releasing music? Like when did that come about, or getting more serious about it? I guess.
Um, and it was kind of weird, like, because I guess before I got FL Studio, I was messing around with like making random drum beats and stuff like that for a little while. And it was mainly, I was kind of into like trying to make movies before that. And so I was like trying to make random bits of stuff for like ideas I had that never became anything. Well, obviously, I'm not a filmmaker, so none of that ever became anything. But pretty much like I would say maybe 2 or 3 months after I got FL Studio, I started releasing stuff. I don't really know what happened. I just like kind of got really into it, and then yeah, I think I got it in like a July 2011, and then in like September I put out a track, and then just kept putting stuff out from there. So I would say in a way I kind of took it seriously as soon as I got like a proper door, and then yeah.
Where did you like learn a lot of your sound design stuff? Because your sound design is fantastic. A lot of the noises you make, a lot of the processing you have really defines like your sound, and you have like your own unique sound too. In the world of bass music, when everybody's slapping OTTs and all these effects on stuff, like you definitely have your own niche within that. And I could hear a song and be like, oh, that's Copycatt. But I'm curious, like, how did you learn a lot of that stuff? Was it just YouTubing? Did you have like a mentor or?
Honestly, I mean, so I started in 2011. There wasn't actually a whole lot of good tutorials back then. Like, I would say
It's true.
there was like a couple of things that were like how to make Skrillex mad growl, and it would just be like modern talking, like just turning the one knob like ee oi oi. So there was like for
Yeah.
me, I feel like it was a lot of trial and error, and like just like listening to artists and like dropping their tracks into the door and trying to like emulate stuff. I probably spent the first 2 or 3 years just using Massive, like Native Instruments Massive, exclusively trying to make
Yeah.
basses with that. So I would say like my like sort of learning journey, if there's like my songwriting is here and my like attention to how much like how much effort I put into like bass design and drum design was like way up here. So like I got all my like drums and stuff sounding relatively speaking all right, and still like my songs were kind of shite. So like I feel like I was really focused on that for a long time, I guess is my point. It was like really trying to get the bass stuff sounding good. But yeah, massive and just trial and error, and then occasionally I'd get like a little golden egg appear, like Skrillex had mentioned, like FM8 in an interview, and I was like, oh God. But yeah, heaps of trial and error, honestly. I won a lot of good tutorials back in 2011, 12.
This is true. Yeah, that'd be a good time to start a YouTube channel.
Yeah. If I mean, I guess it was weird. It's kind of like not a vicious cycle, but like how to explain that, but like there was less market as well, like less people were making tunes. I mean, I definitely think Skrillex in particular kind of kicked off a thing, and like a lot more people started producing around then, but I reckon it took probably like till 2014 or 2015 for that to really start appearing, and then like YouTube tutorials, and then like all the market sort of appeared for it. So it's kind of just like a dead I don't know, it was dead for a little bit, I guess.
It was. Sweet. Yeah. I mean, that was about the same time when I got really frustrated using Ableton Live for the first time. It was about 2013. I found a YouTube tutorial by Dubspot, and that's what made me go to school to learn Ableton Live back in the day. So it was close to about the same time, and there weren't many tutorials. There wasn't a lot of education out there like we have today, when everybody and their grandma has like a YouTube video talking about production.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool though. It probably helped define some of your sound when you had to like explore on your own and really try to like test and see what worked and what didn't work, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that. Yeah, I think even back then I had a little bit of like an agenda that I wouldn't allow myself to watch tutorials for that reason. Not that I think that's necessarily the right way to go about it, but I at that point in my life, I really wanted to kind of like figure everything out on my own and not like use any tutorials. I will say though, there was this thing called Neuro forum back in the day. That was probably went till like 2014, 2015. And actually, I'd say that community, alongside this record label called Adapted Records, is how I ended up meeting like Nolan Frequent and like Johnny Pearson, who runs Night Owl Collective, like a handful of dudes. And they were sort of sharing a lot of bass techniques back then. So I wasn't like a totally isolated unit. I definitely got a lot of stuff from that as well, which was cool.
Night Owl Collective's dope. They release a lot of really good tracks and artists that I've listened to as well.
Yeah, tasteful. Yeah, that's Johnny Pearson. He's got good taste. Yeah, I like his stuff.
Yeah. So at what point did you start getting into the whole Copycatt project? Like you had a project before that, and then you just kind of put that down and switched over to Copycatt. Like what made you rebrand or whatever you want to call it?
Well, if I tell you the name, you might sort of have a guess. I used to be called Aberto, Aberto, and it was actually a misspelling. I realized later. But yeah, it's just a terrible name is the point. It was, so bad.
It's probably good for SEO though, Alberto.
I mean, you'd think, but Google just thinks you're spelling Alberto wrong. That's the thing. If you type it in, it'll just say, did you mean this? I mean, I still get that with Copycatt, but I don't know. It's a little bit more functional in the SEO side of things.
Sure.
Yeah. I ran with Alberto for 4 or 5 years. And then there was a guy from a particular label who was like wanting to release some of my stuff, but he was like, I don't want to put your music out if you use this alias. You have to make a new alias.
Oh, wow.
I think that was actually pretty pushy for a label, but he was right. Like, he was like, we want to like grow you as an artist, and I don't think that will work with that name. It's going to be too difficult. So I brainstormed for like probably 6 months of like what names I wanted to come up with, and I was trying to think of like something like kind of familiar but not like so common that it would just like have no SEO. And Copycatt just, I don't know, came to me one day and it just felt right, and ran with it from there.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't know what I would do if a label told me I had to change my artist name.
Yeah.
I probably would. That'd be a tough conversation to have. I don't know. Worked out for you though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely happier with Copycatt than I am with Alberto. That was that's actually, that page is still up. It's under Andre now, which is AUWNDRAY, which is even worse. Like, don't know what I was thinking there.
I don't know if I would remember that.
No,
Definitely won't remember that later.
no. Well, there's no good music on there, so don't.
Well, good music is subjective, right? So maybe somebody out there would really like it.
Yeah, maybe.
Might not be as good as the Play School remix, but
No, well, that's my
might be all right.
nest egg. That's what I'm. The Andre stuff is just a backup of the backup.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I'd love to like talk some more about some of your workflow and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of music nerds on this podcast. I'm sure they would be eager to learn some of your production process and things like
Sure.
that. So like when it comes to Ableton Live, like do you have any favorite devices or instruments? Like do you have any go-tos and maybe how you use them?
I would say, I mean, I'm sort of getting comfortable with a particular layout with my stuff, which isn't that like it's not that uncommon, but like sort of splitting everything into like a drum section and then everything else that gets sidechained section, like with groups. I would say in terms of like stock devices. Actually, I was thinking about this morning. Recently, I've been mucking around with Gate for sidechain.
Really?
Yeah, like I heard my friend was telling me that there's a really cool rhythm producer over here called Leatrix. Oh, his stuff's sick. I like, yeah, I go ham for his stuff. But my friend was like, yeah, he's using Gate for sidechain. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, you just like flip it and then you use the input to just like mute what you're running through it. And I was like, oh, that's genius. And I tried it. And because I've spent so much money on sidechain stuff. And like I probably still prefer Cable Guy's Kickstart too. That's really good. But if you don't want to spend any money on sidechain plugins, yeah, Ableton's Gate is actually really good. You just like drop it on there, you flip it, so you use it in flip mode, and then you put the sidechain input, and you can like customize the like length of how long it like mutes your signal, or whatever. But yeah,
I wonder what the reasoning is like on a technical level of using a gate instead of the compressor. Because essentially it's doing the same thing, right?
yeah. I mean, for me, I think it's mainly from the angle of like if you want just like absolute mute sidechain, it's really nice to be able to, because like with a lot of sidechain plugins nowadays, they give you kind of like this ability to draw this custom envelope. Because what you want is not necessarily something that's exactly the same as the like, the kick or the drum you're sidechaining to, but you kind of want this like particular like volume cut out of the sound that you're sidechaining. And Gate's kind of good for that because you can kind of mess around with whatever you're using to like actually trigger the sidechain, and then use Gate to kind of like customize this like specific, I don't know, like this volume duck, like this cut, rather than using compressor where it's kind of like it's very linked to what you're putting in. With Gate, you're kind of just like triggering it almost, where you're just turning on this mute. And then I don't know. It feels more comfortable anyway. It's probably very similar. I like it.
If you had an infinity ratio, I think it would be probably the same. But that is interesting. It would be worth A/B and testing.
Yeah,
I'll have to give that a try. Yeah, I never really thought of using the sidechain on the gate. I know it's there, but I never thought about using that to replace my sidechaining with the compressor. It's interesting.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, it's probably just like pleasing my like producer brain way of think of it, where I'm like it has to work this way, even though it, like my volume wise might be doing the same thing, but it feels good, and that's what's important.
Yeah, I find myself like accomplishing the same thing sometimes by using like different devices, just because you get bored using the same thing over and over, just wanting to try something else.
Totally.
For sure. Yeah, I know some people who like literally just automate the utility gain knob and they just like copy and paste that across all their kicks. And I'm like, oh dude, that sounds like so much work.
Yeah,
but they're like, this is the only way I'm doing it. Yeah, I've had a couple people on the podcast who say they do that.
I definitely am holistically against that. I mean, well, okay, that's actually pretty strong. That's a strong stance to take. But
how do you really feel?
Yeah, I used to do like fades, so I'd print stuff to audio and then like cut and like draw the fade in, and like it does sound good, but it's just low. Like I'm like, oh, I want to change my drum pattern for this entire track. Well, now I also have to like manually change all of my fades, and so that's my political objection to that method.
It's fair. It's a fair objection. Yeah, I've resorted to, and it doesn't always work, but I found sometimes it does work for me. I created like a kick sidechain rack, and basically like rather than creating like a ghost kick note, like on a whole new track of like MIDI with like just a little click sound, and then sidechaining everything and dialing in the release to just like a little click sound, and then matching that up with your kicks. I created like a sidechain rack, and it's just like 2 chains, and you mute one of the chains, and the other chain is just so you can have like the full volume of the kick, and you place it on the actual kick track.
Right.
And then the other chain is just a compressor, and you turn on the monitor mode, and you have the EQ on, and then you do a high pass filter, and you frequency up to like say like 1.6 kilohertz. So it's just listening to the top end of the kick.
Just the initial click, right?
Yeah, and then you just turn down the ratio and the release all the way.
Yeah.
And then you just pull down the threshold all the way and turn up the makeup gain, so it's amplifying that little tapping sound. And that's worked for me most of the time. It seems
So
like.
the tap, that's literally just to trigger the sidechain, right? You're not like adding that to the kicker. That's
Right.
just
Yep, it's literally just to trigger the sidechain, the compressor I'm putting on whatever else I'm wanting to sidechain to that kick.
Yeah, that's dope. That's pretty like, because with Gate, I don't know if you have I don't think you have filter options with the sidechain tab. So what I sometimes do if I really want to like mess around with that and be able to like just sidechain to like usually I use around like 200 hertz, like because if I use like a drum break and I want to sidechain to a drum break, I don't want to be sidechaining to like the hi-hats or whatever. So I'll do like a band pass or whatever and just isolate the like 200 hertz range, because that'll get me the kick and the snare. And to do that with Gate, instead of like, because you don't have like a filter section, I don't think, I'll just add like a chain on the like drum track that's muted. So I'll have like a dry lane as well that just like it just passes by this like so I'm talking about like making an audio effect group. You have one chain that has this like basically this filtered signal in it with like the high pass and the low pass, like just boxing in sort of like 200 hertz. And then I mute that, and I just have like a dry chain so the audio passes through. But then from the like side chain in the Gate, I can select that particular like little filtered track, because you know how like you can select an audio input, and then from the audio input underneath that you can select like post effects, pre effects, or like some particular like audio effect in it. Yeah, you can select that particular like audio chain in there.
That's exactly what I was trying to say earlier.
Right. Okay,
Yeah, that's same exact thing, but I didn't actually filter it, which would probably make more sense actually.
Well, you can do it in compressor, I guess, is like what you were saying, is you just use like the actual filter in the compressor in the sidechain.
Yeah,
because you can, which would be easier, I think, if I could do that. Yeah.
Crank up the Q too, so it is kind of, I guess, that band pass.
Yeah, just like one big like peak that pops.
Yep. Nice little popping sound. This would probably be something easier to like actually have a show and tell.
Yeah, totally.
Since most people are just listening to this, we just probably lost like 50% of people. Like, I don't know what the hell you guys.
Well, there's someone out there who's like really well visualizing an entire door and just putting it all together. He's a master.
Yeah, right. This is homework, everybody. Go try to replicate what we just talked about.
We'll have to quickly open Ableton and like follow along to visualize. They have to like put all the effects in as we're saying it really quickly.
Yeah, right. Speed producing. Yeah, well, like, what about other Ableton Live, like native devices or instruments or things? Like, do you have any other favorites, go-tos?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of like ones that I guess would be unique. Like, I actually quite like Dynamic Tube, just functionally, because it does asymmetrical distortion. So with like, one of the like sort of, I would say quintessential neuro sounds is this like fuzzy noise bass where you hear like a sub and some like on the top of it. And I found a really good way to do that is to have like a sub and white noise together. And instead of putting like normal distortion on it where it sounds kind of buzzy, like you put Dynamic Tube on it. And what it does is instead of like squashing both sides of the waveform, it just squashes one. So you get like kind of half the rate of fluttering. So for that, it sounds really good. You get like a full on like crunchy buzz sound. And then usually I'll just like high pass that and then feed a sub underneath. But yeah, for lots of things, I really like the kind of asymmetrical, like distorted sound that you get from Dynamic Tube. Sometimes just
I love that.
It's good.
I feel like Dynamic Tube is like the step, like the forgotten stepchild of saturation in Ableton Live. I don't know. I never really use it. I don't know a lot of people that really use it that often. but like I'm gonna have to probably play with it now more that you mentioned that.
Yeah, no, I rate it. I think you got to use it in conjunction with other saturators and stuff as well. Because the one downfall is I find it feels like it loses a lot of volume when you like tube stuff. Like it'll feel quieter because you're kind of like you're putting like DC offset in basically. So if you put like a saturator in afterwards, if you're doing like basses and stuff, like you can get your volume back. But I guess that's why some people would like throw on dynamic tube and be like, yeah, it's crunchy, but like it kind of feels like weak. I don't know. That's what I assume.
Makes perfect sense. You actually, I mean, speaking of distortion stuff, you actually turned me on to the Wave Shaper by Melda Productions.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
M Wave Shaper. Yeah, I hadn't really played with that until I saw a tutorial on YouTube that you released like a year ago or two.
Yeah. Oh, man. M Wave Shaper, I go nuts for it. It's so good.
You can do some crazy stuff with that. Yeah, I find it like for me personally, it seems like it works best just for like a typical like sine wave or like a smooth sub or something like that.
Yeah.
As like a starting point rather than just throwing it on something that's already kind of aggressive.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's because it like, yeah, it's definitely better on cleaner signals just because like, especially if you're just like drawing like wild lines in there, it shit gets like so like trebly and noisy super quick. So if you have it on like a cleaner signal, then you've got room to make harmonics and it's not going to sound like hectic.
Right.
But yeah, it's so good. I actually saw like a really cool Bunchen tutorial. Do you know Bunchen with two U's? BuunShin. He's like a mad kind of drum and bass primarily focused, but I'd say he's kind of got his own thing. But he put out a tutorial on like, because he uses wave shapers a ridiculous amount. And he was showing off using, there's a particular setting in a lot of wave shapers called, it's like stairs. So when you're like drawing a line in, you can change like your curve mode, and there's one which is like stairs. So it literally is just like hard like cuts like that, like a stair shape. And he was using it to like add fuzz on the top of like basses and that sort of thing. So rather than layering white noise, you kind of get this natural like crunch that happens from adding the stairs. But yeah, I recommend that as well. That's really fun. Like because you just dry wet it in like just a little bit, and it's really crunchy.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that. M Wave Shaper's free too, so free's great.
Yeah,
you don't have to buy extra stuff. It's my favorite price.
Yeah. Oh man, so much of the Melda stuff is good, and like at least like half of it is free. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of free stuff in there. The oscilloscope.
Yeah.
That's a good one too, just for like checking out your basses. I like that. Mr. Bill, I think, made a video.
I've used that M freeform phase is another weird one. It's kind of like I would say you could kind of use it similar to how some people use disperser. It's like you can phase shift stuff, but that's free as well, which is wild. Yeah, there's so many like weird little neat things in there, like free plugins kit.
Yeah, shout out to Melda for giving back to the world, making free stuff. Yeah. What about any other like instruments wise? Like we've talked about effects. Do you have any like typical instruments? You mentioned Massive, that you liked Massive, and that was like one of your plugins that you started out with.
Yeah, I still think Massive actually, because there's probably a lot of other plugins that I would use instead of Massive nowadays, but in terms of sound, I think the like default effects and filters in Massive sounded pretty good. I find every now and then if I pick it up and make a sound in it, just like in terms of like crunchiness, loudness, fullness, I still like the sounds that come out of Massive, but nowadays I think I do a lot of like weird sampling stuff. So instrument wise, like I end up sampling a lot, and then like to generate basses, I'll probably use like some weird filter resonance or something like that to get me started. But in terms of there's a plugin called Ghost, which is kind of like FM8 mixed with a little bit of stuff from like Serum or Vital. Kind of like FM8 with a way more usable interface, I think. It's actually, this is like, I mean, I'm not intentionally trying to like plug him, but he's a mate of mine who made it. But yeah.
Yeah, plug him away.
Yeah, plug him away. Shout out Trey, X Acoustics. But yeah, I've been using it a heap because it does everything that I wanted out of FM8, where you've got like this full on FM matrix there. This would be another time to have like a good like show and tell visual, because I'm about to describe an entire GUI. but like,
No, please.
but yeah, it's got like the FM matrix, like you get in FM8, but kind of the normal oscillator windows, like you get in Serum or something like that. So it's really comfy to use, and all the LFOs work really well. And there's like an effects section which looks a lot like the Serum one. So I use that a fair bit for basses, just for like cool textures and stuff with FM. I really rate that.
Sick. I'll have to check that out. Add that to the long list of things that I need to continue to like download or look
Yeah,
at.
that never ends.
Never, yeah, it's never ending. It's the world we live in. We signed up for
Yeah.
it. We talked a little bit about your bass processing, but for people out there who maybe have like a hard time or struggle with finding their sound or getting their music to like dial in, like when you're finishing off a track, do you have like a checklist of things that you typically go through and look at and say like, okay, this is done, this is done, this is done, like before you call a track finished, I guess, or polished?
I mean, I'm historically terrible at finishing songs. I mean, obviously I've finished songs and released them. So I guess the ones that I have finished, generally, I mean, what I'm looking for when I'm finishing stuff is just that nothing awkward stands out. It's never going to be perfect, and I'm definitely embracing that a lot more now. The best version of this track is just the one that gets released, because if you continually perfect it, it's it's not going out. But yeah, I guess in terms of like just kind of hitting those things that I would actually be like, oh, I should have changed that before I released it. It's just generally things that, or like awkward transitions. Probably I fuss around with arrangement a fair bit nowadays, because I think that does make a difference in terms of like how you kind of attract attention to a particular thing, and then how you like handle it. So I definitely find maybe in the last like 80%, the last like 20% of a track, when I'm at like 80%, I just send it to a bunch of people and be like, hey, what do you think of this arrangement, or what do you think of this in general? And generally, like, if they say something straight away, or like the first thing they think of will probably be something like useful. But if everyone's saying like kind of different things, then it's probably okay. But yeah, generally like the arrangement or anything awkward that stands out. But aside from that, like if I enjoyed working on it a lot, it probably does sound good, and I just need to kind of like get it out and not fuss so much.
Yeah, yeah, that's the struggle too. Is like when you hear something so many times, you get into like tunnel vision
Yeah,
of like listening to it over and over. You don't even know what's up or down anymore.
yeah,
And I struggle for that with that all the time. Like, I've got probably like 7 or 8 tracks that are like 80% finished, and I'm just kind of like, I don't like it anymore. You
yeah.
just kind of move on to like something
Oh man,
else. Yeah, that's a weird balance. I feel like for a lot of producers and artists, when you hear something too many times, and then you just kind of get so used to hearing the same thing, you can't really tell if it's good or not anymore.
yeah. It's such a rut. I mean, I feel like for me, my like relationship with that was definitely like correlated with how much I was actually rewarding myself for finishing stuff as well. Because I think sometimes
Mm,
like you kind of put a lot of pressure on yourself to have finished things, but you don't like do anything, or you don't like have an idea in mind of where you want it to go. I found like recently, at
mm,
least, like the incentive of trying to push myself to play more shows or put together mixes and that sort of thing. I kind of have a lot clearer objective of like, oh, okay, I want to have a track ready that's good enough to put in a mix, or it's good enough to like play in a set. And it sort of
mm,
eradicates all of the perfectionism and makes it much more of like a practical, like it doesn't have to be a masterpiece, it just has to fit this goal, and then I'm kind of rewarded when
mm,
it fits that goal. Whereas I guess I'm just sort of describing my problem, at least for a long time, was just this nondescript, like everything needs to be 100% finished, which is kind of arbitrary, I
mm.
guess. Like there's never like a
Yeah.
perfect finish. You just kind of have to have a context where you're like, okay, I want to put this on SoundCloud, or I want to put this in my mix, or I want to play this at a show. And that like quantifying of it, I guess, like can kind of cut out a lot of the uncertainty of what it looks like when it's finished.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really good perspective too. Of like having a goal for your tracks too. Because I've made tracks where I was like, this would do really well if I was like getting a massage.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like this really, really chill laid back. And I made other stuff that's like, this would be good if it was like I was opening for Excision. It's like dubsteppy and heavy. It's like a completely different
Yeah.
vibe. So I think like having that intention with your music is really good. Something I talked on the podcast with Jenga recently. And he mentioned that too, of like really thinking through like, okay, what is the use case? What is the scenario?
Yeah.
for this track? Am I trying to write just a good drop that I'll throw in a set and maybe the song's only like 2.5 minutes, or is it going to be something that's longer and takes people more on a journey, and it's like a full release?
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
think it's liberating as well with like, particularly if you're someone that produces a lot of like kind of drop focused stuff. And you can, I used to get in this mindset of like, it has to be like this long and it needs to have like all of these bits in it, needs to have like a particular break section and stuff. But then once I started like just making beats and like trying to finish them for a set, I was like, it actually doesn't really need to be a full song if I don't want it to be. Like I literally, and like the main parts that need work, like suddenly I have this incentive to like work on the parts that need work, which are like, it probably just needs like a somewhat functional intro that I can mix into and a somewhat functional break afterwards, and that's enough. And by the time you've actually done that, you've probably got enough to make a full track anyway. But without that like incentive, it's kind of hard to hard steer in the right direction. So yeah, like making a like 2 minute version of your track for a set is probably like a fast route to get to like 80 or 90% done.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing more recently too. Yeah, exactly. For the intention of wanting to start playing more shows and not intending on playing the full track.
Yeah.
Typically, it's only playing a song for like a minute and a half or so live. So yeah,
Yeah. Are
definitely,
you on like do you
definitely.
use CDJs or you got like a controller, or how do you like to play generally?
Actually, funny story. I was at a party with a bunch of friends and people I didn't know, and they're like, "You're an Ableton certified trainer. Like, you should come up on the decks." I don't know how to use decks. Like, I don't know how to use CDJs at all. Like, I'm terrible. I actually am buying some. The XDJ XZs are in the
Oh, sick.
mail. I'm getting some right
Oh, damn.
now. Yeah,
Nice.
but I've always used Ableton. I've always used Live for like performing. Um,
Yeah.
and then I have like a whole methodology because usually I perform with live instruments too. So it just makes sense for me to be able to have a laptop with me if I'm already carrying stuff.
Yeah.
But I do want to get better on the decks. And I was at that party and somebody's like, "You're an Ableton certified trainer. You must be awesome at DJing." And I went over on the decks and like completely embarrassed myself. It was so bad. And like my friend who was hosting the party just like later walks up, he just like really kindly patted me on the
No.
back. Just like, "Hey, let me take
Oh
over."
no. Back pat. Oh, hey, nice man. Like nice set, but it's really
It's like I was there for like 10 minutes. They're like, "Okay, we're gonna have somebody else step in now."
oof. I like the sound of playing in Ableton though. Like, I mean, because I prepare a lot of my sets pretty heavily anyway, like with track listing and stuff, and to be able to like build a few racks where I can do some cool effects and even just like drop a bass in that I made and have like a minute where I just like just like mangle something in the middle of
Yeah,
the set would be really cool. Um,
totally. Yeah, I've actually made effects racks for live performance with like a DJing mentality, and now I use them for producing because it's like, oh, like yeah, I create racks for the scenario of live performance, but then later I'm like, well, this would actually be really cool in a song too.
right. Yeah, because they kind of
Yeah.
have to be like usable if you want to use them in a live set as well. You can't have like a million knobs. You kind of just need like one or two that make the sound
Hmm.
move really. So, but then once you've made that, I can see how you'd be like, this is just convenient. I can just use this whenever. Like I made one
Yeah.
rack that was like, I haven't actually used it in a live thing, but I was trying to go for that like sort of like really simple interface that I can just use for a lot of things. I made one that had like a tape stop, just like one knob reverb that I could just sweep in and out, and then like a stutter or something
Yeah.
like that. And I've been using that a bunch
Yeah.
in like writing. I just put it on different track groups and then just like can cut like a stem or something like that for a bit. But you need it to be
Yeah.
simple. I make all
Totally.
these like complicated racks where I'm like, yeah, this is sick. This can do everything. And I never touch it because there's just too many knobs and I forget what I did.
Yeah. Yeah, or you have like 37 devices in that one rack and like your CPU starts to sputter
Yeah.
because you just loaded that one device.
Or you
Yeah.
get like anxiety when you load it in because it might crash your project.
Right, but it was a good
Yeah.
rack, so
You had fun
that's all
making
that
it.
matters.
It's
That's true. This is true. Do you have racks that you've released? Like, I know you have a sample pack or several sample packs, but have you released many
not
racks?
really. I think because I end up using a lot of plugins that like I don't know. I just can't guarantee that everyone would have. And so like the stuff that I make that sounds cool. I
Mm,
rarely use all stock plugins. There's a couple where I've done it, but yeah, I guess the ones that I really like have like some weird like sort of third party plugin in there. I do like the idea of it. I
Mm.
wanted to make a drum, like a drum creator rack. So where I could, because what I do nowadays, I'll make like a snare body and then like snare tail and then like different types of noise and that sort of thing. And I was kind of like, this process is a bit like cut and paste. So I could just make a bunch of snare bodies, a bunch of tails, and a bunch of like different layers to put on it, and just like macro
Mm.
the like turning the channels on and off. So that's been my idea, but that's as close I've gotten to like
Yeah.
actually putting a rack out as having ideas about it.
Hey, this is the first step. Have you ever played with the DS series of drums in Ableton, the DS kick or the DS snare or clap?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, bro, you gotta check this out. They're awesome. It's Ableton's. I think it's part of. It used to be part of like the Max for Live Essentials, and now it's just built in there. If you just Command F, like search in the browser for DS kick or DS whatever, but it's like really basic sound design, and you can match it to the pitch too. So for the kick drum, you can just literally be like, I want the kick to be an F. You just turn the knob to F, and then you can shape the tone and the sustain and
Oh
everything.
damn, sounds kind of
Yeah,
tight. It's a Mac
yeah, it's
Live
really
thing.
easy for like. It's actually built into Live 11 now,
Oh, okay.
so it comes native. Yeah, the drum synth series.
Damn. Okay, I need to get on that. I'm still on Live 10.
Well, you could still use it. You could still use it in Live 10.
Okay, but it's a Max for Live thing in Live 10.
Yeah, I believe
Okay.
so. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure. I'm like 84% sure. So, but yeah, it's a great starting point. And then obviously you can do all the post processing stuff that you normally would do.
Yeah.
But it's a great starter. It's a quick start.
Yeah, right. Okay. I use Kick 2 a lot for drums nowadays. Usually, I don't know if you heard Kick 2.
Of course, yeah. Kick 2 is great. I honestly haven't used it a whole lot, but at the times I have used it, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I probably should use it more, honestly, now that I think about it.
I've started like ripping drums with it, where I'll like drop a drum, like something from a track that I like. I'll put it in the sampler and then like overlay, because you can like overlay the waveforms. And sometimes I'll just use like, it takes a bit, like it's a bit of fiddling, but I'll like try and use the oscillator and like draw a pitch envelope that kind of roughly matches the sound of the drum I'm trying to like copy. And so I get like a signed version of the drum that I'm trying to copy. And sometimes I've actually ended up with, it's almost stealing. It's almost stealing, except I made the signed version, so I don't feel as bad about it. But I've ripped a few good kicks that way, and at least learned a bit.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know if like everybody steals now. I feel like stealing is just like a part of mainstream music production.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just like the thing to do now.
Healthy.
A lot of people are taking each other's samples, and I don't know. Like one thing I really appreciate about your music is it doesn't sound stock. Like you do a lot of processing and you do a lot of work on whether it's samples that you're grabbing and drawing in or creating stuff from scratch. You definitely have like a unique sound. There's too many like splice sample packs out there that I've heard in people's tracks. And I made that mistake too. Like several times I used like a full horn loop like many years ago in one of my tracks called Funk It Up. And like literally the next day after I released it on my Spotify, like Discover Weekly, I heard that exact hook in somebody else's song. I was like, damn it. Damn. I'm never doing that again. Yeah.
I've tried to get around that by using like older vinyl stuff. But then even then I've run into that problem like once or twice where I've made a cool beat and then like fortunately I haven't released anything that's done that, but there's been one or two samples where I've just felt like I've dug up some like real underground thing, and then someone like Taku will make a beat that uses that same sample and I'm like, ah, shit. that wasn't underground at all. I was having myself on.
But I think like the general listener has no idea whatsoever unless it's like blatantly obvious. Like I don't think I'd say probably 95% of the average listener would never know that you use the same kick as somebody else. Like I think it's just, people when they're listening to music, like this feels good.
Yeah.
And for producers, we might be a little more like, I guess, precious or critical because we know we live in that world. But I think the average listener is just like, this feels good. They don't actually think about hearing the same sound necessarily.
Yeah, right. I think if you do something cool with the sample, ultimately, even if people do recognize it, if you've done something interesting to it, people are probably almost net positive. You know, like people will be like, "Oh, I know that sample," and that's like a really cool way to flip that.
Yeah, exactly, and vice versa. That too, definitely, and it gives you a unique sound, definitely.
Yeah.
Are there any like new devices or anything you found that you thought was really cool, like recently?
Like
you mentioned Ghost.
Yeah. Lots of just kind of like little spruce up things, not necessarily like generating whole new sounds, but just things that add good tone. So I've been using I mean, I'm always fiending for like new saturation stuff because there's just, I don't know, little tone nuances are slowly just growing on me more and more. I found one called SGA. So it's a plugin company called Shattered Glass Audio, and they have like a bunch of like free analog emulations. And there's one SGA 1566, and I think it's an emulation of some like old console unit that had 1566 in it, but it's just like kind of I think it's meant to be a preamp. But yeah, for some drum stuff, I really like that. It's free, which is sick, and it's just like input, output, and then like a high and low knob. But it gets this really distinct kind of distorted kind of analog sound, and in a particular mode, if the treble gets too loud in the input signal, it kind of like mutes it in this really analog like DC way. It just like crunches against one side of the waveform, but it sounds really dope. If you have like some really bright snares or something and you like feed it in right, it sounds pretty sick. So I like that.
Okay, cool.
They also have another one called Code Red, which is also free, and it's sort of similar thing, like an analog preamp, which sounds really sick.
Nice.
So like all of those things I'm finding, because I sort of start with like bass design from the sub. So I'll start with like pretty much just like a sine wave and work my way upwards. So finding interesting ways to like generate distortion and harmonics and stuff, sort of just, I don't know, that becomes the exciting part of the process for me. So the more like weird distortion plugins I find, the more like, I don't know, the more fun I have in the creating process.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you mentioned like creating like an analog type of tone or analog emulation. I not too long ago came across this Max for Live device that emulates analog. It's called AS Console. It's like $30, but it comes with the suite of different things. It has like a preamp, it has like a bunch of different stuff. It has like an EQ and like a width, like a compressor, but it's all like emulating analog, whatever. But it actually sounds pretty good. I got like a free copy. It sounds pretty awesome.
AS Console. Okay.
Yeah. And it's like fairly CPU friendly just because it is like it's Max for Live. It's not some Max for Live is pretty CPU heavy, but this one's it's not too bad.
Yeah. Okay. AS Console. Yeah, I rate that. Any analog stuff. That's good. I used to think it was such a wank though. Like I used to be like, because everyone would be like, oh man, this analog thing, that analog thing. And I'd be like, man, shut up. It's all doing the same thing, but they just like put a pretty bunch of knobs on it. But now I'm turning into that guy. I'm turning into that guy that's like, oh man, this analog compressor emulation.
Yeah, I got like hooked into the whole UAD thing, and I've spent so much money just on their plugins, but they sound so good. And the thing that's kind of a pain in the butt though is like, unless you buy their subscription, you have to have their interface, or you have to have like one of their cards in your computer to actually use the plugins. Kind of pain in the butt.
Yeah, as in like a sound card. You actually need like a.
Yeah, it's called like what is it called? So now they have like a subscription. It's called Spark. You can only access certain plugins that they've released, but it's pretty affordable. It's actually not too expensive. A PCI card. That's what I was trying to say. You have to have like a PCI card. Right. Yeah, or their satellite. They have like a satellite thing that you can plug in Thunderbolt to your computer, but it looks like an old DVD player. it's like a small one, and I don't want to carry that everywhere I go on the plane. That would be annoying, but their plugins sound fantastic. I'm a UAD junkie.
Yeah, so that's the trade-off. Some companies are really like that. They kind of, well, like with iLok as well. I find iLok really frustrating when you have to have the USB. Fortunately, I've only had like one or two plugins, and I don't think I ever used them because of that. But yeah, the thing is, I don't know.
Right. I have two iLoks, and it sucks because like there's different plugins on each one, and so when I leave, sometimes I grab the wrong one. I'm like, damn it, I can't use that plugin now because I grabbed the wrong iLok.
Yeah,
yeah, that's a thing. I actually saw somebody that made a t-shirt and it was an iLock on the t-shirt and then under it said dongle life. I thought that was pretty
Dongle
awesome.
Live.
I was like, I want one of those shirts. It's
That's
amazing.
got to be uncomfortable for anybody that doesn't know what iLock is. Actually, there's probably much worse shirts out there. I'm being so PC right now, but I wouldn't walk around wearing Dongle Life.
That's true. It could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. That's funny. You know, I've had people talk to me quite a bit about like how do you really find your sound with producing music? And I feel like I said earlier, you really found your sound and you have like your own unique vibe with your tracks that are like really consistent. I guess like what advice would you give to artists out there who are still trying to discover and find their own sound for a project or whatever?
I would say emulating is a really good path to just exploring sounds that you like. Because I would say, even despite the fact that I feel like I make some things that sound really unique in my mind, I still sort of generated a lot of my like sounds by initially emulating stuff that I liked. And everything. I wouldn't say like, because I think some people have this idea that they need to like kind of confine themselves to a genre, or like if I want to like improve my skills, I need to like try and make this one thing. But honestly, I find
Mm,
nowadays like the more things I just try and emulate, no matter what it is, if it's like some grunge rock thing or some ambient thing, the more variety, the better in some ways, because you kind of develop a palette of sounds that you definitely like. And then when you sit down to write, you kind of just think you just naturally put it together. But I definitely think the first step is just exploring as much music as you enjoy rather than like trying to do one genre or another. Literally just like find everything that
mm,
you like and try and sound like it. And then from that, you'll probably
yeah.
end up with something that you think sounds like a rip off to some degree, but it to a lot of other people who don't have your exact set of music taste, they'll be like, oh, that's like, I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, that's really true. That's good too. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I listen to all kinds of genres of music, and so for me, it's taken a while to kind of get into the flow of doing that for myself. I don't know. I think it's also important too to have like a really solid organized user library
Oh,
or
yeah.
like saved collections of like
Yeah.
your sounds too, because that creates like consistency as well. That's something I've been really guilty of not doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think if you're particularly like a really sound design focused person, or somebody who like spends a lot of time just making noises, like you want to be able to find those sounds later. I'm definitely super guilty of that, where I just do these long ass sound design sessions and then just kind of like leave the samples in the project. My solution to that, like I haven't changed in that, to be fair. All I've done is I've just added the project folder to my Ableton sidebar. So I like open that and then just open each project and look in the like consolidated samples section. But
Oh, really? That's interesting.
yeah,
So you add all of your projects into like their own folder in the sidebar, and then you just go in and just looked at the audio from that project?
I just put the like the top level folder that has all my projects in it. I have that in the like
Mm.
sidebar, and then usually I just
Oh,
open
gotcha.
that and scroll through each project to find sounds. Because sometimes I think the thing is I tried to make
Yeah.
sample packs for myself, where I'd like go through each project and be like, that sample's cool, that sample's cool, but you kind of sometimes you don't know what samples are useful until you're actually in the middle of writing a song. And so I'll make these like cool sample packs for myself and then use none of the sounds because they kind of just didn't work when it came to writing a song. Whereas sometimes I'll be in the middle of writing
Mm,
something and just be like, okay, I'm looking for something that sounds kind of like this. And I'll just like scroll through and find probably some weird sample that on its own isn't that cool, but just a sound that I made. And then in this particular context, it works really well. So being able to just kind of like scroll through a backlog of all of the random stuff that I've done in sound design sessions is definitely useful. But that's, yeah, a step up from what
yeah.
it was before, which was literally like just it not being there. It's in a folder somewhere, but yeah, you've got to be able to like repeat the work.
Buried for sure. Definitely. I heard you on a podcast. It was the EDM Prod podcast.
Oh yeah,
And I was on that podcast too a long time ago. But I was listening to your interview today and you were talking about how you burned out in like 2018. You just announced that you were quitting music.
yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people listening have felt that way at some point. I know I have personally several times. And just curious, like, what was that process like for you getting back into it, and like what kept you going?
Yeah. It's actually a pretty big question. I wouldn't say I've fully like arrived at a conclusive summary of like I definitely haven't finalized my relationship and with music in the sense that I know exactly like what got me down and what came out of it. But I have a pretty good idea where I feel like as a person, I think I actually went through a phase where I needed to just like go and do my own thing. But I would say what brought me to the
Sure.
place where I wanted to like distance myself from music was kind of the social aspect of it, where I really kind of fed on it for attention. And I've come to
Mm,
realize there is actually a healthy amount of like wanting attention and wanting to broadcast yourself and wanting to connect with people through a medium. That's it's actually a
yeah.
healthy thing. But in the place that I was in like I would say 2018 ish, 2019, it was unhealthy because I was kind of like neglecting my normal life. It was more like an addiction. Like I was actually like it was kind of a drug for me where I needed dopamine. So I was like posting stuff and I
Yeah.
don't know, just constantly feeding on the feedback without actually finishing anything or looking after myself. I didn't really have like self respect. I just had this kind of like dopamine addiction. So I think I
Yeah.
tried to quit music. I would say like 2 to 4 times. I like either softly like tried to disappear or like made an announcement. And just it took me ages to kind of figure out how to like actually respect myself and like look after myself and live my normal life and do what I want to do. And also
Mm,
kind of have this like relationship with music where I actually want to put myself out there and do stuff.
yeah.
It was a bit of a journey. Like, and I think, I mean, lockdown in like 2020, 2021 definitely like took me to the other end of the spectrum because I was like by myself in Melbourne for a year and a half or whatever.
Yeah.
Probably the most isolated I've been in my entire life where I was just like alone all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
Me too.
yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure that was all of us, right? We all like
A lot of,
it
yeah,
was
we
just me. Like I just went through lockdown.
you were the only one.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like I feel like you might have experienced this as well. Like after lockdown, I don't know if you like kind of have like a ridiculous social craving afterwards where you're like you kind of all the normal things that you took for granted you're now like, oh man, I can't wait to just like be in a bar with other people, or I can't wait to just like be at a show even if the music's not that great or it's not my favorite thing, like just to be in a room with other people who are like enjoying
Yeah.
a sound.
Yeah. You don't necessarily appreciate something until it's stripped away from you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really true. Yeah, I remember my first show coming back after COVID. It was like, it's like it was still coming out of the lockdown. And we had everybody tested and stuff at the show, but I just remember thinking like, I don't actually care if anybody's here like for this show before I played. Like I just didn't care because I was like, I'm just happy to be like around people again and being able to do what I love,
Yeah.
not for the attention. It was just happy to be able to do it
Yeah.
and have that opportunity. Yeah, man. Like I'm starting to see social media more as like a tool to like connect with real people on the other side of the world and build like a relationship, even if it's not a deep relationship, but to like use it as an opportunity to give back to people, because it's so easy just to like have that dopamine hit like you were saying of like, oh, I got like so many more likes on this post, I'm super cool, like,
Yeah.
like it's hard
Yeah.
to, it's a weird balance. And I find for myself too right now is like I'm learning how to set boundaries with that. Like I don't look at my phone for the first like 2 hours that I wake up now,
Yeah.
because I'm just trying to keep that mental. It makes a huge difference for the rest of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But thanks for
Keeping that.
sharing that.
Oh yeah, no stress, man. It's I think it's something that yeah, like you said, some people handle it better than others. Like when you get some sort of like attention or like positive feedback from creating stuff. I think either way it brings growth. Like some people, the people who don't handle it as well will grow a lot out of it if they can weather it, in the sense that like because it's actually it's not just I don't think it's just related to your creativity. I think it's something related to like functioning as a human being and you know, like being in a society with other people as you learn how to like, I don't know, I guess like navigate relationship. Creativity really is just another form of relationship. And I think the like
Mm,
challenge that you navigate with creativity is like keeping the focus on like what you're trying to create while engaging in this experience, which is, you know, kind of as new for you as it is for anyone experiencing your music. Yeah, but it is like
yeah.
a learned skill, I think, and it's I think it's an extension of self respect to be able to like create something and handle like all of the kind of attention you might get from it, and realize that it's not just because like, you're there, it's because you did something that people liked, and it's, not about appeasing them 100%, but you are actually like creating something almost as a service, like while you're being honest with yourself or whatever, you're actually creating something with the intention of like, you're creating an experience for people. And it's like,
yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I mean, artists are in the service industry, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah.
You're right. That's really cool. I like that, creating experiences for people. And I mean, whether it's at a live show or just for your music and you hear it in the car. I mean, music's so powerful. Like, I know I've had some of the worst days where I'm just driving my car and I'm pissed off and like traffic's terrible and I'm just mad about something. And then I hear like a song and my whole day is just so much brighter, just makes everything better.
Yeah.
It has a lot of power to it, which is just really cool.
Yeah.
If you really think about it on that level.
It sticks with you. And I mean, that's probably naturally the drive for anyone creating music, is initially that they had experiences with music that were, like super motivating. Like for me, I mean, obviously Skrillex is like different now. He's still making really cool stuff, but I think that like 2011 era for me, I don't really listen to that kind of music anymore. But at the time, like the effect that like whole wave of music had on me was like, I don't know, that was kind of euphoric. And so for me, I'm almost like, that's in a way my benchmark, where I'm like, I want to be able to create that experience for somebody else. I want some like 14-year-old discovering my music on SoundCloud or whatever and just losing their mind and being like, this is awesome. And like, I want somebody else to have that same experience that I had, because it's just, I don't know, it's magic. And same with live shows. I think I didn't used to really care so much about like how my live shows went, but since going to a few shows where it was just like the coolest thing ever, I now have that in mind for when I'm creating stuff. I guess that keeps everything in check as well. It's easier to kind of like stay focused when you have those experiences and you're like, I don't know, fresh in your mind.
That's cool. Yeah, I love that. I think you're the first person I've ever met that said they didn't really care how their live shows went.
I mean, like, I wasn't motivated, at least. I was like on the anxious end, where I was just like, I kind of almost hated playing live because I was so anxious about it. I didn't have the focus of like, oh, like this is the experience I'm delivering, or here's what I'm already doing well. It was all just like, oh man, like I got to stand in front of people for an hour and like play them stuff that they probably haven't heard and might not like, and just like time for me for a while.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. Well, I want to respect your time. I know we're well over the hour mark. But I encourage anybody listening to this podcast, definitely check out Copycatt music on a streaming platform near you, whatever that looks like. But yeah, man, it's good stuff. And what upcoming projects are you working on, if you have anything to share?
Lots of little things at the moment. I mean, I'm being a bit whimsical at the moment. I'm allowing myself to just make random things when I feel like it. But I'd say the next thing I'm looking at putting out is a Vorso remix. So it's a remix of Wannabe by Vorso. Just sprung on it one day. I just ripped his track off Bandcamp and started remixing it. But he's endorsed it now, so it's okay.
Good.
But yeah, so probably that's that, great. And then just lots of random little things. But there is stuff coming out.
Yeah, good. Well, I was hoping there would be. I'm sure I'm not the only one. For people who maybe want to connect with you, where's the best place for them to hit you up?
Probably Instagram. I'm actually really terrible with social media in general, but I definitely have Instagram and Facebook, and I technically have Twitter, but Twitter's not the one. Twitter's bad. But
yeah, I hate Twitter too. Yeah, I've dropped off that.
I don't know. I've had bad experiences, but yeah, Instagram. Instagram's pretty good.
And you're on Twitch too. Are you still doing Twitch streams?
I will do a Twitch at some point. I'm really inconsistent with it. That's another thing where I'm just like, I'm going to jump on Twitch. And everyone's like, why didn't you announce it?
You got to turn on those notifications, everybody. Hit that follow and notification bell.
Diligently keep track of everything that I'm doing, because I put no effort into broadcasting myself. I'm very selfish.
No, that's fair enough, though. I feel like I'm kind of the same way sometimes. But like that's when you really know who your true fans are, because they'll seek you out, right? They'll do the extra work to make sure they stay in touch or connected.
Yeah, so apathy appears like confidence sometimes, which is great. Everyone thinks you're confident. You're just not giving a shit. That's all.
You're just being lazy. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a great marketing tactic.
Brilliant. I love that. I should do more of that, honestly. It sounds nice. Sick, dude. Well, Andre, it was great hanging out with you, and I really appreciate your time and your music and all the stuff that you're doing and not doing. Definitely stay in touch and come visit Denver, man. Like, if you play a show out here, please hit me up. I'd love to come out and see you.
Oh, for sure. Man, I'd be keen. Actually, before we go, I've got to know, what's like your favorite kind of venues to see bass music in Denver?
I'd say for like you, Cervantes is like the first thing that comes to mind. Cervantes is a really dope venue. Definitely your vibe. People would love you. They do something called Shift Thursdays,
Okay.
where they feature a more like underground bassy music kind of stuff. And I think that every time I've been to Cervantes, it's a vibe, and it's usually there's a decent crowd showing up. Yeah, check that out. And I can email you more ideas too if you want.
Yeah, no, definitely. Hit me with them. I would love to know.
Yeah, if you need a place to crash too, like let me know.
Hell yes.
Because I know the touring struggles can be real sometimes.
Yeah, I'm definitely not good at managing it. So yeah, if you get a text at midnight, that's it's me, because I didn't organize accommodation. You've roped yourself into that now. Can't retract it.
Yeah, it's whatever midnight your time means for me. I'm not quite sure, but yeah. Yeah, you might have some like real like time change issues to touring in the US.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, the jet lag will be real. I believe that.
It'll be so real. I never thought about that. People touring from Australia, that'd be rough.
I don't know. I guess you just gotta get good at sleeping at airports. I think that's how people do it.
Yeah. Or just a lot of coffee.
I don't think there is an ideal way to do it, probably. You just suffer.
Exactly.
Yeah, cheers for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Anytime. Hey, thanks again, everybody, for listening to the podcast. Make sure you give Copycatt a follow. And once again, if you would leave a positive review, if you don't hate the podcast on Spotify, or hit that like, subscribe, follow wherever you listen to your podcast, that would be lovely. Feel free to hit me up with any comments, questions, concerns, thoughts on the podcast. You can just go to liveproducersonline.com/podcast, and you can send me an email there at the bottom of the page. Have an awesome week. Go make some tracks. I'll see you back on Tuesdays, and see you next time.